Rowan Hale sat on the back steps of his home, staring at the broken model airplane in his hands. The pieces lay scattered across the wooden boards like a small disaster he could not undo. He had spent weeks building that plane, measuring every tiny piece, sanding every wing, painting every corner with slow, careful strokes so the colors would shine. He had dreamed of watching it fly high above the fields, cutting through the wind like a bird finding its freedom. But now, everything felt ruined. His green eyes grew heavy with frustration. His shoulders tightened. He felt as if the whole day had turned against him, as if every effort he had made had been wasted. It wasn't just about the broken plane. It was all the little things that had gone wrong. The spilled lunch at school, the teasing from a few boys, the headache he couldn't shake. And now this, the one thing he thought he could control, had fallen apart. He pressed his lips together, trying to stay calm, but the sting behind his eyes reminded him just how much this hurt. A soft creak sounded behind him. Grace Hale, his mother, stepped outside, a shawl wrapped loosely around her shoulders. She didn't say anything at first. She simply paused beside him, taking in the scene: the broken plane, the tense shoulders, the downcast eyes. She didn't rush him with questions. She didn't tell him to cheer up. She didn't ask what happened or why. Instead, Grace sat quietly next to him, folding her hands in her lap. Rowan felt her presence like a warm blanket, soft, steady, patient. It did not erase his disappointment, but it softened the sharp edges of it. Minutes passed in silence. The evening breeze brushed against them. A lone bird whistled in the distance. Rowan felt his mother's patience wrap around his aching heart. Finally, Grace spoke with a voice gentle enough to rest on the air without breaking it. "Sometimes things fall apart," she said softly, "but you can choose your next step." Rowan stared at the broken pieces in his hands. He wanted to believe her words, he really did. But disappointment pressed hard against him, like a weight he could not lift. "How do I choose anything?" he whispered. "When everything goes wrong." Grace touched his shoulder lightly. "You just begin again," she said. "Not because it's easy, but because you're stronger than you think." Rowan sighed deeply. He wanted to trust her, but the discouragement still wrapped around him like a heavy coat. That night, Rowan placed the broken pieces inside a small wooden box. He closed the lid gently, not ready to face it, but not ready to give up either. The next morning, Rowan walked to Caleb Frost's house with the box tucked under his arm. The air was cool and crisp, and dew clung to the grass like tiny beads of glass. Rowan dragged his feet a little, embarrassed and unsure. Caleb was older 14, and known for being good with tools and patient with small projects. He never laughed at mistakes. He never mocked anyone. Even so, Rowan's stomach churned. He felt foolish carrying the broken pieces. Foolish that he had failed again. Foolish that he couldn't fix something simple. Caleb opened the door, wiping his hands on a cloth. Rowan lifted the box slightly. It broke. Caleb nodded calmly, as though this were perfectly normal. He didn't laugh. He didn't shake his head. He didn't ask if Rowan had been careless. Instead, Caleb knelt and opened the box. He studied the pieces with thoughtful eyes that weren't sharp with judgment, but soft with understanding. He picked up 2 fractured parts and gently fitted them together. They clicked perfectly. "It's not ruined," Caleb said. "It's waiting for another try." Rowan felt a small spark of hope rise, inside him, tiny but warm. The 2 boys went to Caleb's shed, which smelled of wood shavings, paint, and old leather. Sunlight streamed through the cracks in the boards, falling across the workbench like golden beams. They spent the morning sanding, gluing, and adjusting the little plane. Caleb explained each step with calm patience: why one wing needed more support, why glue should dry slowly, why mistakes didn't mean the end of anything. Rowan noticed how frustration slowly faded, replaced by steady breathing and focused hands. Working together felt different from failing alone. His fingers trembled less. His shoulders relaxed. And for the first time all morning, he believed the plane might fly again. Hours passed without Rowan noticing. But then, just when things seemed to be going well, Rowan picked up a small can of red paint. His fingers slipped. The entire can tipped over and spilled its contents across the work table. The bright red paint spread quickly, like a river escaping a broken dam. It coated tools, brushes, wood shavings, everything. Rowan froze. The frustration returned instantly, hot and sharp. "I can't catch a break," he muttered angrily. Caleb leaned over the table, looked at the paint, and smiled lightly. "At least the table looks interesting now." Rowan blinked. That wasn't the reaction he expected. Then he let out a small laugh, just a tiny one, but it loosened the tight knot inside his chest. The moment felt less heavy. They cleaned what they could. They let the rest dry. They kept working until the plane was whole again. The paint was uneven. One wing leaned a little, and a small fingerprint sat proudly on the tail. But it could fly. And that was enough. Later that afternoon, Rowan carried the plane home with careful hands. His mother was in the kitchen, slicing apples. Rowan held the plane out for her to see. Grace looked at it closely, the uneven paint, the tilted wing, the tiny imperfections that told the story of a struggle. But her smile was full of pride. "It's not perfect," Rowan said softly. Grace nodded. "But you tried." Rowan felt something settle. Inside him, a quiet strength, a steady breath. He placed the plane on the table and gently ran his fingers over its surface. It was crooked. It was messy. But it was his work, his effort, his courage, and that made it special. That night, Rowan went to bed feeling lighter. Not because everything had gone right, but because he had found a new way to stand up again. Later that week, Rowan and Caleb walked to the open field just outside town. Grass rolled like waves in the breeze. The sky stretched wide and endless, filled with soft clouds drifting lazily. Rowan held the plane carefully. His heart thumped inside his chest. "You ready?" Caleb asked. Rowan nodded, though his palms were sweaty. He took a deep breath and lifted his arm. The wind brushed across his face gently, as if giving him permission. "Here goes," he whispered. He released the plane. At first it wobbled, just a small, uncertain wiggle in the air. Rowan held his breath, bracing for failure. But then the plane caught the wind. It lifted. It rose. It began to glide, cutting through the air with its crooked wing and uneven paint. Steady and determined, Rowan's heart rose with it. A wide smile brightened his face. Caleb clapped beside him with excitement. The plane soared for a good distance before finally dipping and landing softly in the grass. Rowan didn't panic. He didn't groan. He didn't freeze with worry. Instead, he ran to it with steady steps and picked it up carefully. "It flew," he said proudly, "and I can fix the rest." Caleb nodded. "Exactly." Behind them, Grace Hale stood at the edge of the field, her shawl moving gently in the wind. She watched her son with a soft, knowing smile. She saw more than a repaired plane. She saw a boy who was learning to rise after falling, learning that effort mattered more than perfection. She whispered to herself, "Happiness begins when we rise again." That evening, Rowan placed a model airplane on his shelf. It leaned a little to one side. The paint was still uneven, but it stood there proudly, full of effort, full of struggle, full of hope. Rowan realized something important. His days didn't need to be perfect. They only needed his courage. And he had plenty of that now. He looked at the crooked plane and smiled. He whispered, "Tomorrow I rise again." Moral: true happiness does not come from perfect days. It comes from choosing hope and courage, even when things go wrong. Let's learn the meaning of some words in this story. Vocabulary section. Frustration, a feeling of being upset, when things don't go as planned. Example, Rowan felt frustration when the plane broke. Disappointment, sadness because something didn't turn out the way you hoped. Example, the broken plane filled him with disappointment. Steady, calm, and controlled, not shaky. Example, working with Caleb made Rowan's hands feel steady. Patient, able to stay calm while waiting or facing problems. Example, Caleb was patient while helping Rowan fix the plane. Embarrassed, feeling shy or uncomfortable about something. Example, Rowan felt embarrassed bringing the broken pieces. Encouragement, words or actions that give someone confidence. Example, Caleb's words gave Rowan encouragement. Effort, hard work, or trying your best. Example, the plane showed Rowan's effort even if it wasn't perfect. Courage, being brave enough to try again even when you're afraid. Example, Rowan used courage to test the plane again. Hope, believing that things can get better. Example, a small spark of hope rose in his heart. Rise, to stand up again after falling. Example, Rowan chose to rise again and keep trying. Remember, every small step you take is a rise towards something better. Like Rowan, choose courage today. And if you want more timeless stories that warm the heart and strengthen the spirit, share and subscribe for more stories.